Working the night shift as a nurse in Utah, 7 sinister rules that will haunt you forever. The hospital loomed like a specter in the night, its windows glowing with unnatural light. Sarah, a night shift nurse, felt the weight of dread as she approached Oak Hollow Hospital. The sterile hallways, meant to be her sanctuary, whispered secrets, dark, twisted tales of suffering and despair. None of it felt right. A chill skittered across her skin, and she shivered despite the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The evening had begun as usual. Machines beeped rhythmically, but the beeps became hesitant, faltering as if something sinister was lurking in their mechanical hearts. It was too long before Sarah noticed the patients in the ER murmuring darkly about the rules. Their vacant stares and cryptic warnings sent ice prickling down her spine. She glanced at her fellow nurses, but their furtive glances told her they shared a deeper understanding. Their camaraderie felt laced with fear that tightened around Sarah like a noose. Just another long night, she whispered to herself, but the echo sounded hollow. As she made her rounds, the shadows darted just outside her vision, flickers of movement that made her pulse race. It was just her imagination, right? She gripped her pen tighter, trying to shake off the sensation. That is when she saw the first sign of something wrong: a senior surgeon with a charming smile but eyes that burned with intensity. Dr. Leland. He approached her, friendly yet invasive, and she felt his gaze wade too deeply into her personal life, stirring something unsettling within her. Before she could retreat into her tasks, he pinned her with a look that felt predatory. "How is Mia?" he asked, his voice smooth, but the question carried a weight that pressed heavily on her chest. Betrayal bubbled beneath her skin. Why did he care? That uneasy thought roamed like a shadow just out of reach. Just after midnight, a chill swept through the halls, more piercing than before. The intercom crackled, a voice announcing an emergency in the trauma bay. Panic surged in Sarah's veins as she raced through the halls. Yet, the heaviness in the air stifled her. Something's not right, she thought. She moved instinctively, fear-coated adrenaline guiding her. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The lights flickered ominously as she returned to her routine. Then a familiar voice pierced the air, a call from Mia. Her sweet child's voice filled the room, a lifeline, but it was marred by a haunting narrative. "Mommy, there's a lady outside my window. She's in white, and her eyes, they look inside me." The panic in Mia's voice gripped Sarah's heart with icy fingers. Shadows? In her daughter's room? An urge to shield Mia from the darkness consumed her. Rushing through the haze of anxiety, Sarah stumbled upon an old medical chart, its yellowed paper encrypted with chilling notes: 7 sinister rules. Rules that bound the truth inside these walls, rules meant to silence dissent. Each detail dragged her deeper into a pit of nausea. The unsettling stories of families waiting to hear about their loved ones dripped with despair. Whispers of betrayal echoed in her mind. With resolution igniting a fire within her, she vowed to unearth the hospital's secrets. Just as her path solidified, the intercom screeched, announcing, "A patient has escaped." Sarah's breath hitched, panic surged. The terror coiled tightly in the air, and she realized the rules weren't just fabrications, they were warnings. The darkness was alive, and it was coming for her and her daughter. Would she have the strength to confront it, or would the shadows envelop them both before dawn breaks? Adrenaline coursed through Sarah as she raced down the dimly lit corridor, her heart hammering in rhythm with her pounding footsteps. Each flickering light sent shadows dancing across the walls, stretching menacingly as if reaching out to grab her. All she could think of was Mia, her precious baby, alone in a house that was suddenly a terrifying cage. The intercom's voice faded, replaced by a heavy silence that felt thicker than the night air. As she turned a corner, the sharp sound of her shoes echoed off the sterile tiles, amplifying her growing dread. Something was wrong in Oak Hollow, and it gnawed at her insides like a hungry beast. The whispers of the patients returned to her, echoing ominously in her mind. The woman in white, a dark clamor wound through her thoughts. Suddenly, a crash resonated from the surgical wing. An icy dread sank deeper into her bones. Fear clawed at her throat as she approached the door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Against her better judgment, she pushed it open. The room was chaotic, papers scattered, and a gurney overturned, suggesting a struggle had happened moments ago. "Help!" a voice whimpered from the corner. Sarah squinted through the dim light. There, huddled against the wall, was a nurse, trembling and wide-eyed. "They took him," he got out. "Who? What happened?" The nurse glanced over her shoulder, as if she expected something to emerge from the shadows. "It's true, the 7 rules. You need to listen. They made him disappear. They're coming for us all." Deep down, Sarah's instinct screamed. She didn't know what was happening, but the fear in the nurse's eyes fed her own. They weren't just stories, they were a map to the madness surrounded by the hospital's walls. Urgency sharpened her resolve. "We need to get out of here." But before she could reach for the nurse's arm, the emergency lights flickered on, bathing the room in an eerie red glow. The sharp whine of an alarm cut through the silence. "No. We can't go out there." The nurse gasped, her panic rising. "Why?" Sarah demanded, but deep down, she felt the truth hanging in the air. Something horrible lurked within the hospital, waiting for the unwary. The walls trembled as if the building itself was alive and aware. The sound of footsteps reverberated from the hallway. Heavy, deliberate steps. Sarah's heart raced as she moved towards the exit, dragging the nurse with her. They had to escape before whatever was barricaded within these walls found them. As they reached the door, a chilling laugh echoed faintly, sending shivers down Sarah's spine. It was the kind of laugh that twisted the gut, one that suggested that pain and suffering lurked just beyond the threshold. She turned, secretive stories of her colleagues flooding back. She could feel the weight of their secrets, a collective horror pinned beneath the polished floor tiles. "Go," she urged, yanking the door open, dragging the nurse with her. But as they stepped outside, the hallway stretched endlessly before them, an impossible labyrinth devoid of exits. They were trapped. The laughter grew louder, engulfing the space like a creeping fog, each chuckle sending a surge of dread coursing through the air. "What have you done?" the nurse whimpered, eyes darting around nervously. "It's not over," Sarah muttered, realizing then that the rules weren't just warnings. They were shackles binding lost souls within the haunted confines of the hospital, and as she hesitated, she felt the very walls begin to pulse, the building breathing in synchronization with the frantic drums of her heart. Was she too late? Would she uncover the truth about the rules, or would she become yet another ghost within Oak Hollow? With a single flicker of hope, she vowed not to lose Mia again. But, as the laughter boomed closer, she couldn't help but wonder, what if the key to their salvation lay in the very darkness they feared? The walls reverberated with laughter, a twisted echo that wormed into Sarah's mind. Her instincts screamed, urging her to run, but the labyrinth of the hospital held her tight within its grip. Beside her, the nurse was shaking in fear, eyes wide, darting to and fro as if expecting a monster to leap from the shadows at any moment. "Which way?" "We have to find a way out." Sarah's voice trembled, though she fought to stay calm. I don't know," the nurse replied, her panic morphing into desperation. "Everyone disappears, Sarah. Everyone. They don't want us to leave." Her word pierced the air, heavier than the shadows that loomed nearby. As the laughter faded into the background, a stifling silence enveloped them, thick enough to cut. They moved cautiously, stepping over the scattered debris of frantic escape attempts. Sarah's eyes swept the corridor ahead. The flickering lights were the only source of illumination, barely holding back the darkness. "Maybe we can find a stairwell or an emergency exit, something," Sarah urged, but her voice lacked conviction. The oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on her shoulders. It felt as if unseen eyes were upon them. As they rounded a corner, she caught sight of a familiar door, the one marked, break room. It didn't make sense. This way, she whispered, pulling the trembling nurse with her. The break room was dim, lit merely by the light of the small refrigerator. The air was stale, infused with the faint remains of old coffee and something unnameable, a metallic twinge. Just as they stepped inside, the metallic creaking of the door echoed behind them, sending Sarah into a frenzy. "I can't stay in here. Someone might see us," the nurse whimpered. "We might find something useful." Sarah countered, her breath quickening. But even as she said it, she felt the sinking hope inside her gut. "Please, no more hiding. We need to go." The nurse's voice trembled like a rabbit hounded by wolves. Then, from the end of the hallway, the laughter returned, louder, more taunting. It reverberated off the walls, a sinister lullaby that made the hair on Sarah's arms stand on end. They had to move, had to make a choice. "Okay, we can't stay here," she agreed, pulling the nurse towards the door. "Let's check the other wing." She forced her legs to move, dragging the nurse along, feeling sheer terror wash over her. As they stepped back into the corridor, the sounds of the hospital shifted. The walls seemed to lean closer, closing in on them with every passing second. Shadows writhed, shifting and twisting as if they were alive, hungry for the warmth of their flesh. "What's the first rule?" Sarah shouted over the escalating chaos, adrenaline kicking in as her survival instinct took over. "Don't go to the lower levels." The nurse cried, her eyes darting around as if the terror lurked just out of sight. "It doesn't matter. We don't have a choice. We have to find Mia." The nurse gasped as another crash echoed down the hall, closer this time. The lights flickered violently, plunging them into darkness, then back into red light, as if the hospital itself was feeding off their fear. And then silence. Complete, suffocating silence that hung heavily in the air, thick and oppressive. "Is it over?" the nurse whispered, her voice barely a breath. "No. It's just begun," Sarah replied, clutching her friend's hand tighter as icy fingers of dread wrapped around her heart. Suddenly, the air shifted. Something moved, and it was not the wind. An icy chill rushed down Sarah's spine. "What's happening?" the nurse's voice quivered as she gazed into the dim shadows ahead. "Turn back." Sarah whispered sternly, but it was too late. A figure emerged from the dark, cloaked in white, its face obscured, yet the laughter it filled the space again, louder and more sinister. Sarah's blood ran cold, frozen in place. They stood before the embodiment of their fears, a grim reminder of the rules they'd never understood. What had they unleashed? What if the darkness wanted more than just to play? The figure stepped closer, the shadows shrinking away, washing over them like a tide. "Welcome to Oak Hollow," it beckoned, as a sense of impending doom wrapped around them tight. In that moment, Sarah realized they might just lose everything. But before she could think again, the figure pointed down the hallway, whispering a single word that sent frost through her veins. "Run!" And in that instant, the labyrinth they thought they knew morphed into nightmares far beyond their comprehension, slipping into dark unknowns they were only beginning to understand. Could they survive long enough to uncover the rules of the damned, or was this their end? The figure lunged, its white cloak billowing like smoke in a gust of wind. Sarah's heart raced, pounding against her ribcage as her instincts kicked into high gear. She yanked the nurse's hand, propelling them both into a sprint down the corridor. "Don't look back. Just run," Sarah cried, her voice sharp, slicing through the oppressive dark as they raced deeper into the maze of the hospital. The laughter echoed behind them, like a twisted soundtrack punctuating their desperate flight. Each footfall felt like a drumbeat announcing their impending doom. The red lights blurred their surroundings, casting unsettling shadows that danced on the walls, tantalizingly close yet just out of reach. "Where do we go?" the nurse shouted, panic lacing her voice. "Anywhere but here," Sarah replied, her breath raw, her throat on fire. She felt sweat trickle down her back, mixing with the icy rush of fear. They rounded another corner, each twist and turn leading to more darkness, more horror. Finally, they skidded to a halt in front of a doorway marked, "Emergencies Only." The door was ajar, darkened inside like an invitation to the abyss. "Should we?" the nurse whimpered, eyes flitting from the shadows to Sarah's frantic expression. "They can't find us in there. We have to take the chance." Sarah pushed the door wider, stepping into the black hole. The heavy air swallowed them whole. Inside, their breaths echoed. The fluorescent lights flickered erratically, buzzing like angry hornets. Shelves lined with syringes, 4 bags, and medical equipment loomed around them, resembling grotesque specters in the dim light. But there was no time to linger. "Check the cabinets," Sarah urged, her voice urgent. They rifled through the drawers, the nurse clumsily knocking a tray of scalpels to the floor, the clanging sound reverberating like a gunshot in the unsettling silence. "Shoo! They'll hear us," Sarah hissed, eyes darting towards the exit, adrenaline surging through her veins. Suddenly, the laughter returned, creeping closer, spilling through the door frame like a shadow that was hungry and alive. "Why is it laughing?" the nurse whispered, terror crawling up her spine. "I don't know. But we need to find something, anything that can help us." Sarah's voice trembled. She opened her palm to reveal a small plastic vial of liquid, its label torn beyond recognition. "Is that? It doesn't matter. We won't stick around to find out." Before they could think any further, footsteps echoed outside, heavy and deliberate, filling them with dread. The laughter morphed into an eerie chant, a familiar yet incomprehensible tune sung by unseen lips. "Sarah!" the nurse gasped, backing away from the door like it was a venomous snake. But Sarah couldn't move. She felt the pulse of the place, its heart drumming in sync with the chaos around them. "We have to check if the coast is clear. If we're going to survive, we need to know what's out there." In a moment fueled by sheer desperation, she edged toward the door. "Are you insane?" "No. We can't go out there." But Sarah's curiosity was stronger than the nurse's fear. Peeking through the crack, she spotted a shadow moving fast, gliding silently down the dimly lit corridor. As she took a deep breath to back away, a bone-numbing chill washed over her. The temperature plunged, mingling with the realization that they weren't alone. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted something stirring, something pulsating in the dark. A shape, more defined now, hovering just beyond the threshold of light, watching, waiting. "Sarah, what is that?" the nurse whimpered, stepping back against a cabinet, eyes wild. I don't know. But we can't stay here. We need to." But before she could finish, the figure lunged toward the door, and Sarah slammed it shut just in time. "Go. Behind the counter," she ordered, her heart racing as they ducked low, adrenaline coursing through their veins. The laughter erupted again, louder this time, sending waves of panic surging through Sarah. This wasn't just an escape, it felt like a hunt. "What do we do?" the nurse cried, clutching Sarah's arm. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, desperately searching for answers. "We wait. We outlast it," she whispered, even as her mind screamed that running was their only true hope. But then a heavy silence fell, wrapping around them like a shroud. In the stillness, a chilling whisper cut through the air, chilling her bones. "Will you play with us forever?" What were they facing? Who were the true players in this deadly game they had unwittingly entered? They glanced at each other, dread spiraling in their chests. All they had was a moment, and it was ticking down. Could Sarah find a way to outsmart the darkness lurking just out of sight, or was this just the start of their horrifying descent into a never-ending nightmare? The air thickened around them, suffocating in its stillness. Sarah's heart thudded in her ears as she attempted to steady her breathing. The whisper hung in the air, a sinister invitation that wrapped around her like a cold hand. She couldn't let it sink in. This wasn't a game she wanted to play. Don't listen to it, she whispered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. The nurse's eyes darted around, wide and frantic, searching for an escape that didn't exist. The laughter grew fainter, but it still echoed, as if circling them, waiting for the moment to strike. Just as Sarah thought she could catch a breath, a heavy thud resonated against the door. Adrenaline shot through her. What was that? She gasped, pressing her back against the counter, her heart racing like a wild animal desperate to break free. The nurse was shivering, pulling her knees to her chest. "We shouldn't have come in here," she muttered, her gaze fixed on the door, fear etching deep lines on her face. A series of muffled whispers seeped through, chilling them to the bone. A low, honeyed voice melded with the cruel laughter, twisting words that no sane mind could comprehend. "Forever is such a long time." The voice danced around them, taunting, weaving through the sterile air. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently overhead, plunging them into darkness before recovering. In the split second of black, shadows shifted inside the room, sprawling like dark tendrils across the walls. "Get away from the door," Sarah hissed. Panic surged anew as she reached for the nurse, pulling her away from the counter. "What do we do?" The nurse whimpered, tears glistening in her terrified eyes. "We wait for the right moment. We have to be smart. That's our only hope." But inside, Sarah felt the weight of despair. She wasn't sure how they could outsmart something that thrived in darkness. Just then, the door rattled violently, the chill permeating as if something cold was desperately trying to break through. Each jarring sound sent a spike of fear deep into Sarah's core. She glanced around, searching for anything that could serve as a weapon. In the corner of her eye, she caught sight of a rusted metal tray. "Here. Use this." She hurled it towards the nurse, who caught it clumsily, fear turning her hands to stone. "It would have to do." "The whispers. They keep saying things." The nurse stammered, gripping the tray as if it were a lifeline. "What if they know we're here?" "They can't know." Sarah snapped, the desperation making her voice sharp. "We'll outlast them. Just keep quiet and stay close." With urgent silence surrounding them, they listened once more. The whispers were growing again, echoing louder now, insistent and insidious. "Come and play with us, we have new friends." The words pricked at the edges of Sarah's sanity. The last thing they needed now was friends. Suddenly, in a flurry of action, the door slammed against the wall. It swung wide open, revealing a room shrouded in darkness, shadows swirling like smoke. The figure reappeared, its face obscured. It was closer this time, inches from freedom, moving silently yet with unnatural grace. The laughter bubbled up again, high and piercing, splitting the air. "Run!" Sarah shouted, yanking her friend along as they dashed toward the opposite side of the room, blood roaring in her ears. They had no plan, no time for thoughtful decisions, just instinct kicking in. They sprinted past the cabinets, heartbeats drumming like war cries, scrambling for the back exit marked only by a flickering emergency light. "Sarah, we can't get caught!" The nurse shrieked, her voice slicing through the chaos. "What if it's a trap?" Sarah shot back, feeling the floor pulse beneath her feet, almost alive beneath the weight of the impending dread behind them. "I don't care. I'd rather take my chances outside than face whatever that is." The nurse yelled, determination mingled with terror lighting a fire in her eyes. Suddenly, a jagged scream filled the air, a guttural sound of pure insanity that wasn't laughter anymore. They were running out of time. Panic surged as they burst through the door, colliding into blinding light. But Sarah's heart sank. They had only traded one nightmare for another. Outside the hospital, chaos reigned. Shadows moved everywhere, twisting into shapes that didn't belong in the light. "Where do we go now?" The nurse gasped, checking behind them. "Anywhere but here." Sarah shouted, but somewhere deep inside, a terrifying thought took hold. What if they weren't really free? And as they ran, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the game had only just begun and that the shadows were coming for them next. The street outside the hospital was alive with chaos, a nightmare that twisted reality into something unrecognizable. Red and blue lights flashed erratically, illuminating panicked faces. Their expressions reflected terror and confusion, mirroring the dread swelling inside Sarah. "Over there!" she shouted, pointing toward a narrow alleyway between two crumbling buildings. They sprinted towards it, feet pounding against the pavement, hearts hammering against their ribcages. The moment they ducked into the alley, Sarah felt the atmosphere shift. It was colder here, more suffocating than before, as if the shadows had followed them, creeping on silent feet. She turned to the nurse, who was shaking, her grip on the metal tray failing. "Stay close," Sarah urged, her voice strained but firm. They could hear voices drifting from the street, some were shouting, others were pleading. But those sounds felt distant, obscured by the growing whispers that pricked at the edges of their sanity. "Come back!" The sound intertwined with the rustling leaves above them, as if the darkness was beckoning them further into its embrace. "Did you hear that?" the nurse whispered, eyes wide with fear. "Just keep moving," Sarah insisted, casting uneasy glances around. The hairs on her neck stood tall, warning her of something lurking just beyond sight. They couldn't let their guard down, not even for a second. The alley widened, opening into a small courtyard shrouded in shadows. Battered furniture lay scattered around, remnants of what must have once been a gathering place. A rusted swing creaked in the wind, its gentle motion almost mocking. Sarah's breath quickened, the sight striking an odd chord of nostalgia. She pushed the feeling aside. The past had no place in this world. "Where do we go now?" the nurse murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Look for something to barricade ourselves." Sarah started, but her words fell short as a chilling sound echoed from behind them. A low growl managed to crawl under her skin. It wasn't human. The nurse's face blanched. What was that? Suddenly, a figure darted into the courtyard, moving with unnatural speed, cloaked in darkness. It paused at the edge of their sanctuary, its eyes glowing like coals in the night. Sarah's breath hitched. This wasn't just some mere shadow. This was something alive, malevolent. "Run!" she screamed again. They fled into the adjoining building, an old, dilapidated structure that smelled of decay. The interior was cloaked in darkness, the only source of light peeking through shattered windows. They stumbled into what looked like an abandoned waiting room, furniture covered in a thick layer of dust. As they navigated through the wreckage, the whispers grew louder, filling the room with an ominous presence. "Why fight us?" the voices insinuated, a chorus of taunts blending into a melody of despair. "You'll join us soon. We have to find a way out," Sarah panted, her mind racing. But the voices suggested something sinister, that it was too late for escape. The nurse clutched the metal tray, searching frantically for a weapon. "I can't hear. It's too loud." Then, without warning, a deafening crash reverberated through the room as something struck the door, sending splinters flying. They stared wide-eyed, the weight of fear immobilizing them. "Sarah," the nurse began, but her voice faltered. Heart racing, Sarah grabbed the nurse's arm, pulling her deeper into the building. "We need to find an exit. Now." Just ahead, a flicker of light caught her eye through a cracked door. It was a chance, an illusion of hope. But as they neared, the ground beneath them trembled, the whispers crescendoing around them. Join us." Before they could react, something broke through the darkness, a shadowy figure, more twisted and powerful than the last, blocking their path. Its face was a nightmare, contorted in ecstasy. "Time to play," it said, its voice dripping with malice. Faced with imminent danger, Sarah felt a surge of defiance rise within her. Whatever this thing was, they weren't going to be its pawns. "In this game, it's you. Who's losing?" she challenged. But as the figure lunged, the walls shook, raining debris upon them. They had to fight, or they'd become part of the whispers, forever echoing in the void. And with that thought came a chilling realization: the game had changed, and they were no longer running from shadows. They were the prey. Could they turn the tide, or were they lost in this nightmare forever? Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as the shadowy figure lunged. She barely had time to process its twisted features before she felt its cold breath on her skin, a sickly sweet stench that made her want to gag. She yanked the nurse backward, throwing herself against the wall as the being crashed into the space they had just vacated. It roared, and the sound fractured the silence, sending a tremor through the building. "What do we do?" The nurse screamed, panic blaring in her voice. Just keep moving," Sarah shouted, her mind racing. The flickering light behind the cracked door called to her like a beacon. It had to be an exit, a sliver of hope in this hell. They wove through the chaos of the room, glancing back just in time to see the figure contort and shift, elongating as it moved. Its form became a fluid, writhing mass of shadow, melting into the very walls, making escape feel futile. "Sarah, it's right behind us!" The nurse cried out, her eyes wild. Fear-stricken, Sarah surged forward. They pushed through the door, stumbling against the cold floor of a stairwell. A beam of light shone from the exit above them, hope igniting in their chests. They raced upward, the whispers growing more frantic, clawing at their minds. "Join us!" they shouted as the steps creaked beneath their weight. Fingers of shadow gripped the stair railing, poking through the walls, enticing them to stop, to surrender. "Run!" Sarah's voice echoed back at her, haunted by disembodied laughter that skittered off the walls. With every step, the air thickened until it clung to her, suffocating. They reached the landing, breathless and desperate. At the top, the door stood, marred and stained. Hope and dread wrestled within her. She grabbed the handle, but it was cold, unyielding. Panic surged as she rattled it, but it didn't budge. "Is it locked?" The nurse whimpered, glancing over her shoulder, her face pale with fear. "No. Open it!" Sarah yelled, terror clawing at her throat. The whispers transformed into a cacophony of voices, each one laced with anguish. "You can't escape," they taunted, wrapping around her heart like chains. "Move!" Sarah pushed against the door, determined to break free from the looming dread. She kicked it, desperation fueling her efforts, until at last, the hinges groaned and gave way. The door swung open, revealing blinding light, but as they burst into the open air, the chilling realization hit them with full force. They weren't in a safe place, they stood on the rooftop surrounded by nothing but darkness. Below, the streets were in turmoil, twisted shapes moving like shadows among the chaos. They were trapped, a tiny island atop an abyss of despair. "We need to find a way down," she gasped, her voice shaking. Just then, a chilling laughter pierced the night, echoing from beneath them as the malevolent figure of shadows from within the building materialized before them on the roof's edge. "You can't escape, you belong to us now." Sarah's stomach dropped as the figure reached out with an elongated arm, fingers spiking like daggers. There was nowhere to flee, nowhere to turn. "Sarah!" the nurse cried, inching away, terror plastered on her face. "Together!" Sarah shouted, but her voice wavered. The crumbling roof threatened to give way beneath their feet as the figure drew closer. In its eyes, she saw a hunger, a thirst for despair that chilled her to the bone. She looked back at the chaos below, realizing the truth: they were surrounded by darkness, and surrender was not an option. Not now, not ever. "Fight!" she screamed, ripping a jagged piece of metal from the roof's edge. The air thickened with dread, relentless as the shadow leapt towards them. The game had changed again, and now it was just about survival. The darkness roared, and in that moment of conflict, a haunting question surged through her mind: would they fight off their fate, or were they destined to join the whispers forevermore? Sarah's fingers tightened around the jagged metal as desperation coursed through her veins. The figure lunged again, its voice a whisper of malevolence. "You can't fight fate, it's already chosen you." Heart in her throat, Sarah swung the makeshift weapon. It sliced through the air, but the shadow dissolved, slipping away just before impact. It hovered back, mocking her efforts as a chill swept across the rooftop, stealing her breath. "Spread out!" Sarah barked, her mind racing. They couldn't stay together. The creature might pick them off one by one, but they had to stay alive, right? The nurse hesitated, her face a mask of fear. What if it gets you? What if trust me? Sarah cried. The thought of their potential demise fueled her resolve. She darted to the left, praying her instincts would guide her away from the encroaching darkness. The edges of the rooftop crumbled beneath her feet, debris threatening to send her tumbling into the chaos below. She could feel the weight of shadows closing in as she glanced back. The nurse was still there, petrified. You have to move. But before she could react, the figure lunged towards them again. A low growl emanated from its depths, vibrating through the air. The nurse barely dodged, adrenaline kicked in, forcing her to scramble away. Sarah! Climb! Sarah shouted, spotting an old fire escape ladder bolted to the wall. She rushed toward it, adrenaline pounding in her ears as she ripped the rusted cover open. The escape felt like a blessing, hope fighting against the engulfing fear, but as she began to climb, the metal clanged ominously, as if forewarning her of a trap. The figure's laughter echoed again, sending chills down her spine. You think you can escape? Just keep going. Sarah urged, her heart racing as she felt the air shift. The nurse grabbed hold of the bottom rung just as the shadows surged up behind them, reaching for flesh. You have to let go. Sarah yelled desperately. The nurse hesitated, her grip tightening around the metal. In that moment, Sarah knew they might both fall into despair, into whatever the creature promised. No. The nurse's eyes brimmed with tears. I want to leave you. But they had no choice. The shadow lunged harder, attacking the few steps before it could devour them whole. Let go. Sarah screamed, panic heightening in her voice. It was a gamble, a sacrifice that might save them both. With shaking hands, the nurse finally relented, letting her grip slip. She landed on the ground, where the darkness coiled around her, gripping her like a vice. Sarah! Her scream cut through the chaotic laughter. Light flooded Sarah's vision, she reached for the heavens. Climbing faster, desperation coursed through her with every rung she took. She had to get up. She had to find a way off this rooftop. But all at once, the air thickened again. A weight pressed against her chest, almost tangible, as an echoing voice rasped through the shadows. Run from me, and I will find you. Always. The laughter twisted into something serpentine, a sound that slithered under her skin, burrowing deep, begging for her to look back. Without thinking, Sarah climbed faster, but the shadows flickered around her, trying to pull her back. She could still hear the nurse's screams beneath her, a haunting melody that gnawed at her heart. Then, in a rush of uncertainty and sheer panic, she reached the ledge. A burst of wind whipped against her face, offering a momentary lapse of clarity. Gazing down, she realized a nearby building's roof jutted out, a chance for escape. But could she leap? Could she risk it all? The figure's presence loomed behind her, stronger than ever, filling her with dread. Jump! Her instincts screamed. And with that thought, she launched herself into the abyss, not knowing whether she would find safety or plunge deeper into darkness. Do we dare make such reckless leaps from our own realities? With the chilling laughter waning below, she hurtled through the air and heard a frightening whisper in the wind, "You'll join us. Would the leap lead her to freedom, or to a darker fate worse than before?" The world shifted as Sarah plunged through open air. Time seemed to stretch, each heartbeat booming in her ears like a drum. With her mind flooded by fear, she felt both the exhilaration of flight and the terror of impending doom. Then, she crashed onto a concrete rooftop, gasping as pain shot through her body. The impact jarred her senses back to reality, and she rolled, scrambling to her feet. Where was she? The shadows that had pursued her were gone, evaporating into the stillness. The rooftop loomed stark and empty, save for the lingering echoes of her panic and the oppressive silence that followed. But that relief was short-lived. Flickering lights from a nearby building illuminated the scene. The dull glow hinted at signs of life, but something felt wrong. The shadows weren't just gone, they had transformed into something more sinister, lurking somewhere just out of sight. Sarah! Voices erupted from below, but they were warped, distant. She turned, trying to discern the source. Maybe it was the nurse, maybe hope still flickered below. But when she approached the ledge to peer down, the darkness grew thicker, pooling at her feet like a black fog. "Get inside!" A voice echoed from the doorway behind her. It was a stranger, a figure shadowed in darkness, emerging from the stairwell with wild eyes and a trembling demeanor. "You can't stay out here. It'll come for you." She had no clue who this person was or what they knew, but every instinct screamed at her to trust him. The atmosphere around them pulsed like a heartbeat, warning her that the creature's presence still lingered. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaky but determined, the stranger's face twisted in despair. "Someone who thought they escaped too. Just get inside before it's too late." Ignoring the frigid tendrils of fear itching at the back of her mind, she bolted toward the door he gestured to. A pulse of darkness whipped past, grazing her shoulder. She could almost feel its icy fingers trailing. "Close it!" he shouted as she stumbled through, slamming the door behind her. In an instant, the room plunged into shadow, illuminated only by the flickering overhead lights. The stranger reached for an old wooden chair, bracing it under the doorknob. "What's happening?" Sarah panted, her breath hitching in her throat. "Where are we?" "This is an old crisis unit abandoned for years," he explained, eyes darting around nervously. "But this shadow, it knows it follows, it feeds on fear." His words struck her like a physical blow. "And the nurse?" she murmured, the images of her friend's terrified face slashing through her mind with sharp knives of guilt. A momentary shadow passed over the stranger's face. He looked away. "If it's found her," he began but couldn't finish. "Don't say that." Panic surged through her once again. "We have to try and save her." "I tried, too," he said, voice cracking. "You have to accept it. It takes who it wants, and it never stops." The air quivered with uncertainty. Doubt seeped in through the cracks of fear. Sarah grabbed the stranger by the shoulders, shaking him. "You don't understand. I can't give up. I want tea." His eyes widened, confusion flickering amidst despair. "You think fighting will help? It will only make it worse." Suddenly, a chilling laughter erupted, echoing through the room like a sinister melody. The shadows at the edges of the room pulsed, dancing closer, breathing in the air thick with terror. "Do you hear it?" he said, panic settling its icy grip around them. "It's back." A crack formed in the doorway where the chair shifted under the weight of darkness, revealing glimpses of something unfathomably malevolent beyond. "What do we do?" Sarah whispered, fear wrapping around her throat. "We run or we fight," he replied, the tremors in his voice betraying his bravado. Only one option clawed at her mind, one terrifying truth. But the idea of facing that darkness again paralyzed her. "Choose." The stranger yelled, his fear evident, mirroring hers. With the laughter growing louder, drowning out reason, Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. She steeled herself, feeling the weight of choices hanging in the air. "What will you do?" The question echoed in her mind. She opened her eyes, ready to face the creeping dread, fully aware of what it could mean. But then, the shadows quivered once more. "This is where it ends," they hissed. And just like that, Sarah wondered, could she really choose between survival and the sacrifice for her friend? Would she dare open that door again, even if it sealed their fates? The shadows twisted and writhed like living beings, filling the small room with a palpable sense of dread. Sarah's heart raced faster than ever as the monstrous laughter surged from the cracks in the doorway. It was taunting them now, a sinister reminder of the reality they had tried so hard to escape. "Sarah!" the stranger yelled, shaking her from her daze. "We have to decide now. What if it's a trap?" She whispered, the fear squeezing her throat tighter. She felt the cold sweat drip down her back, every moment buzzing with hesitation. "There's no choice," he shouted, urgency painting his features. A shudder ran through him. "It's coming. You can feel it. We either fight or let it take us." With those words, she felt the icy fingers of doubt give way to something deeper. A flicker of determination ignited in her chest. She thought of the nurse, alone and terrified, and all the moments they had shared. They had to keep fighting. "You're right," she said, her voice steadying. "We gear up and confront whatever this is." "Are you insane?" The stranger snapped, disbelief etched on his face. But even as he protested, she saw the briefest glimmer of hope. "We can't run forever," she retorted, the adrenaline pumping through her veins. "What's the plan?" He hesitated, shaking his head as if trying to unfurl a haunting thought. "The only way to put an end to it is to confront the source, the heart of the shadow." "Then let us do it," she replied, a fierce resolve solidifying her spirit. She hurled the chair off the door and swung it open wide. The darkness surged toward them, swirling in chaotic motions. "Welcome back," the shadows cooed, their sinister voices humming in twisted harmony. Without thinking, Sarah felt the boundaries of her fear break, propelled by the determination to free herself and Mia. "Get ready," she shouted as she charged forward into the darkness. The stranger followed with frantic steps, adrenaline overtaking their caution. Inside the abyss, shapes zipped past like arrows, shadows gnashing and whispering. They could feel the malevolence enveloping them, threatening to siphon their will. Yet, Sarah barreled onward, refusing to yield to the clutches of despair. Suddenly, she spotted something glowing faintly ahead, a shimmering orb pulsating with light. "There!" she yelled, pointing towards it. "Go! We need to reach it," the stranger urged, running alongside her, the shadows clawing and grasping futilely, desperately trying to anchor them back into their lingering void. As they dashed towards the light, it grew brighter, radiating warmth against the cold. It started to expand, pushing back against the shadows. They could hear it humming a harmonious tune, gathering their courage while whispering words of hope. Just as they reached it, the ground beneath them shook violently. "Hold on!" she shouted, grabbing the stranger's arm. The orb launched forward, sending a brilliant wave cascading across the darkness. The shadows writhed, screeching with agony as if repelled by the light. "Now! Face it!" the stranger shouted, pointing toward the convergence of darkness swirling before them in nightmarish agony. Sarah pushed through to the forefront, panic and resolve battling within her as uncertainty crouched low in her mind. "Leave us alone!" she cried. "You have to let us go." And then, something extraordinary happened. The shadows seemed to slow, the collective consciousness of their torment wavering. It was as if her words had cracked open a truth suppressed within the darkness. The voice that responded was hauntingly familiar. "You're foolish to think you can escape me," it echoed. "You're tethered to fear." Sarah's heart pumped against her chest as the figure materialized, a silhouette shifting between states of horror and regret. "No. You won't take anyone else. You hear me?" As Sarah's scream split through the air, the orb around them pulsed violently, and the darkness began to fracture at the seams. The figure was losing its grip, its form dissolving like smoke swirling away in the wind. In that moment, Sarah pulled the stranger tight. "Together now!" she shouted, and they reached for the light, ready to embrace whatever came next. The orb erupted into a blinding explosion of luminescence. Those fragments swallowed the shadows whole, burning brighter as they lost their form. The light washed over them, coursing like electricity, and in an instant, Sarah felt the weight of the shadows lift. Light flooded her vision as she and the stranger landed back on the rooftop, the one they had just escaped, now shining under the moonlight. The chaos of the hospital was a distant echo, the fear melting away like snow in sunlight. "Is it over?" the stranger panted, disbelief flickering through his eyes. "I think so," Sarah whispered, glancing around for any sign of the nightmare. But deep inside, She knew the shadows would always be there, lurking at the fringes of her memory. They shared this bond forged in fear. Mia. Sarah gasped, realization slicing through her momentary peace. She needed to get back to her daughter, heart pounding. She turned to the stranger. "Thank you for helping me face it." He nodded, but his eyes reflected another truth. "Be careful, darkness may find you again." And just like that, they parted ways, forged by their shared terror but undeniably changed. As Sarah raced down the stairs, each step felt heavier, infused with bittersweet remnants of her escape. She burst from the alley into the night, her breath hitching with newfound strength. The world outside was still chaotic, the streets alive with distant sirens. But now, she felt like she could tackle anything. "Mia!" she cried, sprinting with purpose, navigating through the turmoil, desperate to see her child safe. And as she rounded a corner, everything went quiet. The confrontation had left her altered, but she knew her fight was not yet over. She had to bring Mia back to safety, out of harm's way. Gritting her teeth, she drew in a purposeful breath, and with fierce resolve, stepped boldly into the lingering night. The darkness only feared those who would shine. You need to subscribe now to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section below with your thoughts, reactions, and wild theories about the ending. And, for the love of all things terrifying, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.